I am the rented, damp two-bedroom apartment on the edge of Seattle, Washington. I have watched the red eviction warning letters being taped to my own front door. I have felt the bone-chilling Pacific Northwest condensation seep through my rotting window frames, and I have witnessed a desperate 23-year-old girl pack her life into trash bags, only to return years later and buy me out with cold, hard cash. Right now, in the relentless deluge of late autumn, my interior smells of wet dog fur, acrylic spray paint, and cold, cheap instant coffee. The digital clock on the microwave ticks past 2:14 a.m. Katie Woods sits on my worn linoleum kitchen floor, her hands shaking as she looks at a glowing smartphone screen. Her bank account balance reads precisely $42.16. Her net worth is currently negative $34,000, dragged down into the abyss by $28,000 in predatory student loans and $6,000 in maxed-out high-interest debt on credit cards, charging a brutal 24% annual interest. Her credit score has plunged to an abysmal 520. In the next room, her 7-year-old sister, Lily, sleeps under a faded blanket, breathing softly, entirely unaware that the system is preparing to tear her away. Katie is an unpaid, overworked landscape architect junior at a cutthroat urban planning firm downtown. By day, she calculates soil load bearing capacities and plant root zones for corporate billionaires. By night, she scrambles through the unrelenting Seattle rainfall, taking on back-to-back gig shifts, dashing through the Rover and WAG apps to walk high-maintenance dogs for wealthy tech executives. She works 16 hours a day. She sleeps 4. Yet her cash flow remains violently negative. Katie suffers from the quiet, deadly disease of the working class, inflation blindness. She believed the foundational lie passed down by generations: work hard, get a degree, trade time for a fixed paycheck, stay safe, avoid investments, because everything outside a savings account is a scam. She did not understand that inflation was silently eroding her purchasing power by 7% a year, while her high-interest credit debt compounded against her like an avalanche. She had no emergency fund. She had no safety net. She was living on a high wire stretched over a razor-sharp financial canyon. Then came the spark that set the fire. To catch up on a grueling corporate deadline, Katie brought home a commercial-grade chemical soil conditioner and aerosol model spray for a park project. She worked until her eyes burned, collapsing on the couch at 4 a.m. At 6:30 a.m., little Lily woke up early. Curiosity led her tiny hands to the kitchen table. A loose cap, a spill, a sudden agonizing chemical burn across the child's right palm. Lily screamed. Katie awoke to horror, panic, and overwhelming guilt. At school, 3 hours later, the elementary teacher spotted the chemical burn mark and the severe hysterical anxiety radiating from the child. The teacher did what the law demanded. She dialed the Washington Child Protective Services. By 4 p.m., a sharp knock echoed through my hollow wooden door. Agent Sarah Vance from CPS stood on the threshold, clipboard in hand, eyes cold and unyielding. She inspected my cramped kitchen, noted the hazardous materials, the cramped conditions, the utter lack of child safety barriers, and the palpable financial stress lingering in the air. The verdict was swift, brutal, and non-negotiable. Lily was placed under immediate conditional supervision. Katie had exactly 45 days to resolve the safety violations and demonstrate financial stability. If she failed, Lily would be placed into the state foster care system, and the case would be escalated to family court. The price tag for salvation was exact and devastating. $12,000 for a specialized family defense attorney to fight the state custody petition, $4,500 for mandatory home safety renovations specified by CPS, $2,000 for court-ordered psychological evaluations. Total emergency cash required, $18,500. Deadline, 45 days. Failure meant total destruction. Lily lost in foster care. Katie stripped of guardianship. Credit score tanked below 500. Automatic disqualification from her architectural firm due to legal judgments. Bankruptcy. Total personal ruin. Katie stared at the official papers spread across the kitchen table. The paper felt heavy, like lead. "Why is the system doing this to me?" Katie sobbed, her voice breaking against my thin plaster walls. "I work every single hour of the day. I sacrifice everything. I do not drink. I buy no clothes. I walk dogs in the freezing rain until my feet bleed. Why am I being punished for trying to survive?" She slammed her fist onto the table, glaring at her reflection in the dark, rain-streaked window pane. The reflection stared back, hollow eyes, pale skin, a victim of her own financial ignorance. Then the mirror phrase hit her with the clarity of a physical blow. "You are not poor because you do not work hard," her own internal voice whispered back, cold and uncompromising. "You are poor because you trade hours for dollars, and you let interest work against you instead of for you. Hard work without a system is just slow financial suicide." The next morning, the environment suffocated her further. Her landlord, Mr. Henderson, pounded on the door, holding the CPS notice. "Fix this mess or get out," he snarled, his breath smelling of stale tobacco. "I will not have state inspectors ruining my property value. You have 30 days on your lease, Katie. One more red flag and you're evicted." At work, her senior supervisor, Marcus, dropped a stack of complex CAD rendering files onto her desk with a condescending smirk. "You look tired, Katie. If you can't handle the workload here, there are 50 fresh graduates willing to take your seat for half your salary. Get it done by tonight, or don't bother coming in tomorrow." By day 15, the crushing weight reached a breaking point. Katie sat on a cold metal chair in the hallway of the Seattle Department of Human Services, waiting to apply for emergency government assistance. Her application was rejected within 10 minutes due to her technical employment status. She collapsed on a bench, buried her face in her hands, and wept silently. A shadow fell over her. An old man in a faded navy blue security guard uniform sat down beside her. He carried a thermos of black coffee and had the calm, piercing eyes of someone who had survived every storm life could throw at him. His name was Uncle George, 62 years old, a former senior CAD structural engineer who had been laid off during the tech automation wave years ago. Instead of sinking, George had spent a decade mastering individual asset creation, cash flow management, and capital preservation. He was now an undercover private investor, working security simply to stay active.
George looked at the technical architectural sketches protruding from Katie's bag. Then he watched how gently and expertly she calmed down a frightened service dog sitting near the entrance, using subtle behavioral cues. "You have elite spatial design talent, young lady. George said, his voice deep and resonant. And you understand animal behavior better than 99% of pet owners. Yet you are sitting here crying over paper money. Katie wiped her tears, her tone sharp with defensive pain. I need $18,500 in 30 days, sir. I do not need a lecture. I have maxed out my cards. My credit score is ruined. No bank will loan me a single cent. I am out of options. You are out of options because you are trying to earn your way out with active income, George said, calmly. You cannot outwork an $18,000 deficit on an hourly wage. You need a system that disconnects your time from your revenue. You need cash flow. George pulled a small silver USB flash drive from his pocket and set it on the bench between them. Inside this drive is the architecture of leverage, George said. You combine your primary skill, CAD design, with your secondary skill, understanding dog mechanics. You do not sell your labor, you sell digital assets. Katie stared at the metallic drive. Step 1, George instructed, pointing a thick finger at the drive. Short-term cash flow. You design precise, functional 3D printable files for pet accessories, intelligent training tools, ergonomic slow feeder bowls that prevent bloat, micro-landscape enclosures for small pets. You package them as STL files. You sell them commercially on digital platforms like Cults 3D, Printables, and Etsy for $15 to $45 per file. You create the file once, the internet sells it 10,000 times while you sleep. That is high-margin cash flow. Katie frowned, her deeply ingrained risk aversion flaring up. But I don't own 3D printers. I don't have capital. You do not need to print them, child, George countered firmly. The buyers own the 3D printers. They buy your digital blueprint to manufacture physical products for their local shops. You are selling the intellectual property. George leaned closer, his eyes locking onto hers. Step 2, budget and debt allocation. The moment the digital money enters your account, you do not touch a single penny for luxury. You execute the debt avalanche method, combined with a bare-bones survival budget. 50% goes directly into an escrow account for your CPS legal and safety fees. 30% goes to a bare-bones survival budget, food, shelter, Lily's needs. 20% goes aggressively toward paying off your highest interest credit debt first, eliminating the 24% interest drag and resurrecting your credit score. And step 3? Katie asked, softly, caught in the rhythm of his logic. Step 3 is wealth building, George said. Once the emergency is cleared, you do not hoard cash in a bank account where inflation consumes it. You take 20% of your automated income and buy physical gold bullion as an inflation hedge. Then you open a tax-advantaged Roth IRA. You dollar-cost average into the S&P 500. You let compound interest construct an impenetrable financial citadel around your family, so no agency, no boss, and no economy can ever threaten you again. Katie looked at the silver USB drive resting on the cold metal bench, then up at George's weathered face. Doubt gnawed at her mind like a parasite. "This sounds like a fantasy," she muttered, her voice trembling. "People spend years building online businesses. I have less than 30 days. A few $5 digital files will not stop CPS from taking my M-Guy Lily." George stood up, adjusting his security belt. He did not argue. He did not try to convince her. "The market does not care about your doubts, Katie," he said softly. "It only responds to value and leverage.
You can leave the drive on the bench, or you can take it home and build your fortress. The choice belongs to you." He turned and walked away down the long, sterile corridor. Katie stared at the drive. She grabbed it, shoved it deep into her coat pocket, and ran out into the pouring Seattle rain. When she returned to my damp, cold living room, her fear overwhelmed her logic. She tossed the silver USB onto the cluttered corner of her desk, burying it beneath unpaid bills and eviction warnings. "It is impossible," she told herself, collapsed on her sagging sofa. "I need real money, fast money." Desperation drove her to make a catastrophic financial mistake. The next morning, Katie withdrew her remaining $500 of savings, money that should have bought groceries for Lily, and bought a second-hand, beat-up 3D printer from a shady seller on Craigslist. She believed that if she printed physical dog bowls herself and sold them on the street or at local markets, she could make thousands instantly. For 5 days, my air was thick with the acrid chemical stench of melting PLA and PETG plastic. Katie did not understand temperature calibration, bed leveling, or filament retraction settings. The printer jammed repeatedly. Plastic blobbed into useless burnt clumps. On the 6th night, the hot end nozzle overheated, melting the extruder assembly completely. $500 gone, 5 critical days wasted, $0 earned. Katie sat amidst the pile of ruined plastic trash on her floor, her hands raw and burned. Her phone rang. It was her Aunt Clara from California. "Katie, listen to me." Her aunt's voice came through the speaker, cold and pragmatic. "You are 23. You are an unpaid intern with a ruined credit score. You cannot win against CPS. Surrender Lily to temporary foster care. File for Chapter 7 personal bankruptcy. Clear the student loans and credit cards and rebuild your life alone. You are drowning yourself for nothing." "Give up Lily?" Lily whispered, her throat tight. "It is the logical choice," her aunt replied. Katie hung up the phone. She looked at the small framed photograph of Lily on the refrigerator, smiling brightly at a park before their lives fell apart. Her mind screamed at her to surrender. The debt was too high. The deadline was too close. The legal system was too powerful. "Nộp pa quảng đi," her logical brain shrieked. "Mày chỉ là một đứa 23 tuổi bất lực." She squeezed her eyes shut, tears streaming down her face, hitting the cold linoleum. "No!" her heart roared back, breaking through the panic. "If I quit now, Lily gets lost in the system forever. I'm her only defense." She stood up. She burrowed through the piles of ruined plastic and scrap paper on her desk, her hands frantic, until her fingers brushed against the cold metal of Uncle George's USB drive. She plugged it into her old laptop. The drive opened. Inside were structured folders, CAD parameter templates, search engine optimization matrices for pet accessories, and step-by-step instructions on setting up digital commercial licenses.
Katie did not sleep that night. Using her deep training in landscape architecture, she opened her professional CAD software. She did not design basic shakes. She designed complex, mathematically optimized pet products grounded in real animal ergonomics. She created an indoor active agility obstacle set for high-energy dogs trapped inside small apartments during rainy weather, a common pain point she had observed while walking dogs on Rover. She engineered an interlocking modular slow feeder system that adjusted to a dog's snout size, preventing life-threatening stomach bloat. She exported the designs as flawless, high-resolution STL files. Instead of selling physical plastic, she listed the digital blueprints on Cults 3D, Etsy, and Printables. She priced individual personal licenses at $15 and commercial licenses, which allowed small manufacturing businesses to print and sell the physical items locally, at $45. By day 22, her digital store was live. On day 1, she made 0 sales. On day 2, a small 3D printing shop in Ohio bought a commercial license for $45. It was not $18,000, but it was proof of concept. The system worked. Then came day 30, the dark moment. A heavy white envelope arrived from the family court. Katie opened it with trembling fingers. The court date had been pulled forward. Due to an emergency caseload backlog, the judge had rescheduled her custody review hearing. Her remaining time had been slashed from 15 days down to just 5 days. She needed $18,500 in 120 hours. That same night, a brutal Pacific Northwest gale struck Seattle. Wind gusts exceeded 60 miles per hour. At 2:25 a.m., a massive tree branch crashed through the roof directly above my living room. Torrential rain poured into the apartment. Water flooded across Katie's workstation, pouring directly into her high-performance graphics computer, the single tool she used to render her 3D CAD files. Sparks flew, the screen died, smoke drifted into the damp air. Katie dropped to her knees in the pooled rainwater, soaked, freezing, and utterly broken. Her computer was destroyed, her time was gone, her money was exhausted. She lay on the wet floor crying until no sound came out of her throat. Morning came with cold gray light. Katie did not have the luxury of quitting. She packed Lily off to school, dried her clothes, and went to her evening rover shift, walking a golden retriever for a high-net-worth client in the upscale district of Queen Anne. The client was a senior environmental compliance officer for the state of Washington. As Katie delivered the dog back to the pristine mansion, she noticed the owner reviewing construction blueprints on his kitchen island. They struck up a conversation. Katie mentioned her background in landscape architecture and casually brought up the mandatory $4,500 home safety modification quote demanded by CPS for her apartment. The officer looked at the itemized repair bill from the contractor CPS had assigned to her case. His eyes narrowed. "This contractor is charging you $4,500 for basic drywall patching and child-proof latch installation?" he asked, incredulous. "This is blatant overpricing. Furthermore, this specific contractor is using materials that violate Washington state residential fire safety standards. They are exploiting state-referred family cases." Katie's architectural instincts ignited. She spent the next 18 hours at the public library's free computer terminal, drafting a rigorous 15-page risk management and technical audit report. She documented the contractor's inflated costs, cited specific building codes, and provided an alternative, fully compliant safety plan that cost exactly $300 to execute herself. 2 days before the court deadline, Katie presented the document directly to the presiding magistrate at family court. The judge read the document, her face hardening as she reviewed the evidence of contractor fraud. The $4,500 repair requirement was struck down instantly. The court ordered CPS to accept Katie's $300 self-executed safety plan. Her immediate debt burden dropped from $18,500 to $14,000. Then the true miracle of scalable leverage occurred. That same evening, a prominent pet industry influencer on TikTok with 2 million followers stumbled upon Katie's STL file for the indoor dog agility system. The influencer printed the set on his own 3D printer, posted a 60-second video showcasing his dog using it, and tagged Katie's digital store link. The video went viral overnight. By 3 a.m., Katie's phone began vibrating uncontrollably on her nightstand. Every notification was a sale. $45, $45, $15, $45. Small business owners and pet lovers across North America, Europe, and Australia were purchasing her commercial licenses at a rate of 50 transactions an hour. Her cash flow exploded into an automated torrent. Within 48 hours, her digital store generated $15,240 in pure, high-margin revenue. On the morning of day 35, Katie walked into the Seattle family court with her attorney. She handed the court clerk a certified cashier's check covering every required legal fee and psychological evaluation cost in full. The CPS petition was dismissed. Custody of Lily was restored permanently. Katie walked out of the courthouse holding her sister's small hand, the Seattle rain falling softly around them, no longer a threat, but a clean slate. She did not stop there. She executed Uncle George's financial blueprint with absolute mathematical discipline. She applied the debt avalanche method immediately. 50% of her incoming cash flow cleared the remaining legal costs. 20% was channeled into wiping out her maxed-out high-interest debt on her credit cards, instantly dropping her utilization rate to 0.
Her credit score skyrocketed from 520 to 680 within 60 days. By month 2, she had accumulated an $8,000 emergency fund stored in a high-yield liquid account, representing 3 months of full living expenses. Her digital 3D file store was now a self-sustaining asset, generating a consistent $4,200 per month in automated passive income. By month 6, Katie resigned from her low-paying architectural internship. She rented a bright, modern commercial studio and launched her own specialized pet product design firm. 1 year after the crisis, Katie's financial reality was completely transformed. Her student loans of $28,000 were paid off to the last cent. Her net worth crossed $42,000. She allocated 20% of her ongoing digital asset profits into physical gold bullion stored in a secure private vault, creating a $12,000 physical inflation hedge against currency devaluation. She opened a tax-advantaged Roth IRA account, executing a dollar-cost averaging strategy by automatically investing $1,500 every month into low-cost S&P 500 index funds, allowing compound interest to build her long-term generational wealth. I am the damp apartment on the edge of Seattle. I no longer hold Katie Woods or her sister. 6 months ago, Katie returned to my owner with a certified bank draft. She bought me outright, renovated my structure, and transformed me into a safe, mortgage-free home for a new low-income family starting their own journey. True financial freedom is never found in the trading of your precious hours for a fixed paycheck. It is found in your ability to package your unique skills into scalable cash flow and converting that cash flow into an unassailable financial citadel that protects the ones you love against any storm the world can send. Katie stood in the center of the newly renovated living room, watching Lily paint a small wooden planter box by the sunlit window. The air inside no longer smelled of damp rot, chemical spray, or desperate panic. It smelled of cedar, fresh paint, and security. She pulled out her phone and checked her financial dashboard. Net worth $58,000, monthly cash flow $6,500 in automated passive income from 62 active STL digital design files. Roth IRA, $18,500 compounding steadily in broad market index funds. Physical gold, $15,000 in physical bullion stored securely as a permanent inflation hedge. Debt, $0, zero credit balance, zero student loans. Her credit score now stood at a pristine 760. The system that had once threatened to consume her family was now working entirely in her favor. She had stopped trading her hours for survival wages. She had built an asset engine that generated capital while she slept, while she cooked dinner for her sister, while she walked through the park without checking her bank account in terror. Later that afternoon, Katie walked down to the Seattle Department of Human Services. She did not go to apply for emergency relief. She went to the quiet bench near the main lobby. Uncle George was sitting in his Navy security uniform, holding a warm thermos of coffee, watching the rain trickle down the glass entrance doors. Katie sat beside him and placed a small, velvet-lined wooden box onto his lap. George looked down, then slowly opened the latch. Inside rested a single-ounce, 999.9 fine gold bullion coin, polished to a brilliant mirror finish. "What is this, child?" George asked quietly, though a faint smile touched the corners of his eyes. "That is my first yield from step 3, Katie said, her voice steady and full of warm gratitude. "You gave me the blueprint when I had nothing left to lose. You taught me that hard work without leverage is just a slow road to poverty. This is proof that the system works." George looked at the coin, then back at Katie. "The gold is good, Katie," he said, closing the box. "But the true asset is what you built inside your own mind. They can take away a job, they can inflate a currency, but no one can ever take away your ability to turn raw skill into cash flow." They sat together in comfortable silence, listening to the rhythm of the city outside. Katie looked out at the rain slicking the pavement. For 23 years, the rain had felt like a threat, a cold reminder of everything she lacked. Now it was just weather. She stood up, took a deep breath of clean air, and walked out into the world, no longer a survivor treading water, but the master of her own financial citadel.